third installment, I believe, of A New Way to Library. We thought it would be fun to showcase some of the ways the library is out and about in the community. We're not just within the walls of our library. We are in all sorts of different places. And in fact, we decided to come here to this commercial kitchen at the food bank because we already have some collaboration going. For 3 years now, we've been serving free lunch to kiddos during the summer. Monday through Friday, they can come to the library and get a free, nutritious lunch. And then we also, you can't go in, but you can kind of glance over to Empower Place, which is the children's area downstairs next to the grocery store proper of the food bank. And the Spectrum Discovery area, the library, and the food bank came together to outfit that room with a library and some science exhibits and things like that, things that the kids can do, and then also free snacks all the time, and then free lunch in the summer. And then they also had some evening meals and whatever is needed for the community. So, as part of this Outside the Lines, or A New Way to Library program, we got the idea of having Liz Carlisle come to the food bank and show us and cook for us, because the university chose her book, The Lentil Underground, as their freshman read, their all-university read. And we were going to collaborate with them on some programming, and this is what we decided to do. So I'm going to let Liz take over and show us how to cook a delicious lentil dish. And I think we are going to be helping too. I'm not really sure, but some folks have already helped a little cooking minutes. And so here you go.
Great.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Pam, and thank you, Ira, and thank you, of course, to our hosts here at the food bank. This is probably the most beautiful kitchen that I've ever cooked in. So I think we're in for a treat. I should probably preface this by saying that the only thing I knew to cook probably until I was maybe 22, 23 was like boiling water for pasta. So I am not a professional chef. But the point is that we can work with these lentils and these heritage grains that are grown by our Montana neighbors without having to be in the kitchen for hours and hours. There are awesome things we can do if we want to kind of go to those links. But this is more of kind of about, this is what I do on a daily basis in my own kitchen with lentils and heritage grains, and kind of how I take a basic template and spice it up with different flavors from all around the world, given that we are working with these crops that have a 10,000-year culinary history and are part of cuisines all over the planet. So we're just going to get started a little bit, and the idea is it's going to take, maybe an hour or so for the onions to cook and sort of make friends with the spices, and then the lentils to cook. So during that time, there's a few things that I want to share, maybe a few things. David Oyen is here with us, who is the main character of Lentil Underground, and really, I think one of the main reasons, thank goodness, why we have organic lentils and chickpeas and these heritage grains in our state. So we'll have a few things to share with you, but we also are here so that if you have questions for us, we can just kind of have a conversation about lentils and heritage grains from farm to fork, basically. So there are copies of the recipe on this front table here, and you're welcome to take those home, and you're welcome to kind of follow along. It's pretty simple what we're doing. And thank you, those of you who helped with the onions. And maybe, Dave, would you help me as we go through kind of the first step here, which is we've got 4 pots here, 3 for 3 different flavors of what we're doing with the lentils, and then 1 for emmer, which is the heritage grain that we're going to pair with the lentils. So step 1 is just to take these onions that we've diced, and my rule of thumb is dice at least 1 onion for every cup of lentils that you're going to prepare this way. And so we're going to put them in these pots with enough water to cover them, and then we're going to boil it with whatever spice we want to use. So we're going to do 3 different spice combinations. So this is our next step, is onions going in the pot. So you guys know better than I do. This looks like maybe was this 1 onion or 2 onions? 1. Okay, great. So I think we're going to have about, and there goes the teapot. So something I discovered about adding water during this process is that if you add hot water, it goes faster. If you add cold water as you're going along, you slow down your process. So we're just going to put 1/3 of the diced onions in each of these pots.
I'm just going to interject real quickly. I started to set up chairs, but then I thought, well, I'm not sure how close you want to
Yeah, you don't have to sit down. In fact, you can.
If you want to get close, that is fine. You don't have to sit down.
And pretty soon I'm going to ask you all to help me out. So you're not sitting for long anyway. So we're going to put the onions in the pot. We're going to cover them with water. And we're going to put the spice in that we want to use. And then this is kind of the main part of this process. It's just kind of creating our sauce here that's going to give flavor to the lentils. There we go. And then, yeah, actually a couple volunteers who want to cover the onions with water. Come on up, right on. So the sink is right back there. You got it. Okay, so yeah, that one's ready. Yeah, so the start of all good things in the kitchen, right? Diced onions in a pot. And now we have these special burners that just plug in. So I think you just press on and it goes. Any luck? Yeah, then we'll go ahead and put the lids on just to speed up the process a little bit. And then, do you want to start some emmer, Dave?
Sure.
And then I'll talk about the spices and then, I don't know if it's on yet. So, whatever you think for this size of a crowd, however much emmer.
2, 4, 6, 8.
So, now that we successfully have 3 pans on, this one happens to be blinking, however, which is, the little power is blinking. Does anybody know what that?
I think it's still it heats up.
Oh, okay.
That one was blinking earlier.
Great. All right.
At least the lights.
So we have diced onions, we have them covered in water, and we have them starting towards boiling. So now we're going to add our spice. So we're going to do 3 flavors tonight, which are kind of my 3 go-tos, but there's kind of infinite combinations beyond this as well. So we're going to use curry powder in one of them. We're going to use cumin and chili powder in another one. And then we're going to use berbera from the Silk Road Spice Company and cardamom in the third one. And cardamom is kind of a delicate spice, so you add that in at the end. Because if you boil cardamom with lentils for half an hour, you don't really taste the cardamom after the half an hour. So I'm going to do just about a teaspoon or so to start, and then you can always add more. But putting it in at the beginning gives it a chance to sort of combine with the onions and create this great sauce. And I'm just cranking this up so that it will boil. You can do this as slow as you want, but it just depends on how much time you have. So this one's going to be the cumin and chili powder, so kind of like a Latin American flavor. And if you do this one for longer, it can even get to kind of the texture of taco crumble, and you can use it that way. We're going to do more of kind of a soupier sort of dal-like texture. But it is really interesting that there are versions of foods like dal in other parts of the world too. So we're doing one with curry powder here, but I thought it was really interesting when I went to an Ethiopian restaurant for the first time when I was living in DC, that they cook this dish messerwat, which is what this template recipe is based on that I brought. That's very much like a dal, but with this spice blend berbera, which is a combination of sort of a local pepper and many aromatic spices, sort of like curry powder. So this texture of lentils is something that people cook with all over the world with different spice blends. So we've got the chili powder and the cumin in this one, and there goes the tablespoon. We will just stir it up a little bit. And then move down and put some curry powder in this one. This one is still blinking. Oh, it is. Okay. Well, that one just got started, so maybe that is what they do when they get started. I just don't want to keep you forever while the water is thinking about boiling. So we'll add some curry powder here. And I'm doing sort of heaping teaspoon because we have a little bit more onion than I normally would if I was just cooking for 2 or 3. And then I think berbera is over here. And actually, all of the spice blends from the Silk Road are really great for this recipe because they're all about foods from the part of the world where lentils came from the Fertile Crescent. So this is the Ethiopian berbera from the Silk Road. But they also do an Egyptian spice blend. They do a Persian spice blend. So this is a great, and of course they're a Missoula company. So if you want to play around with different flavors for this recipe, this is a great way to go. So this one back here will be the berbera. And actually, before I do this, I want to pass this around because it's just, who's cooked with berbera before? Awesome. Okay, it's just, I love smelling it. If you go to an Ethiopian restaurant, they will, because you eat with your hands in an Ethiopian restaurant, they'll often at the end of the meal pass around these little wipes for your hands so that you don't leave smelling like berbera. But I always decline because I love having my hands smell like berbera. It's really, it's spicy, it's got kind of a sweetness to it. Really, it'll make your meal. And it's used also for meats, and you can make things other than lentils. But next time, if you have the opportunity to go to an Ethiopian restaurant, if you ever get a combo, there will be that pile of red lentils with berbera, messerwat, which is, yes. I don't know. Okay. Well, the other thing you could do is try the outlets on the wall. All right. So the berbera. Awesome. So we're going to put the berbera in, but not the cardamom yet. Great. And you definitely want to start slow with berbera. You all smelled it. It's powerful and it's spicy. And you can, again, always add more later. So then you kind of watch it at this point. Once you've got the spices in with the onions, you always want this to stay wet. So that's why I've got the teapot. I used to do this with just cold water. I'd have a pitcher of cold water next to this pot. And when it cooked down to the point where I needed to add water, I'd add cold water. But that slowed things down, obviously, because it got cold. So then I got an electric teapot, and I realized, well, if I just use an electric teapot and keep some hot water on hand, then when I need to add water as it cooks off, it won't cool down. So I run my electric teapot and keep some hot water handy. And we'll go ahead and do that. We We might not cook at quite the same pace here because we've got 2 burners that really went for it and the others are figuring it out. But you'll end up having probably about 20 minutes or so as you wait for, what you want to see is you want to see the onions kind of soften up and become translucent as they're cooking with the spice. And then that's when you know it's time to add a little bit of olive oil and salt and garlic. So we can chop some garlic, that can be our next step. And then the lentils. So after about 10 minutes of olive oil or so, and optionally garlic, adding in lentils, and then you're sort of watching again texture as those lentils get to sort of your dal texture. So if you're all ready to come on up here, now is the time to chop garlic. Hi.
I like to chop garlic.
Awesome. Yeah. And we have multiple cutting boards. Yes, washing hands is very good. Yeah, that's good, right? I think let's do 6 cloves. So we have 2 cloves per pot. So now the question, of course, is why are we doing all of this? Like, why do we even want to cook lentils? Right? I brought along a little bit of information and some of the things that I think about and some of the reasons why I've, of course, gotten very, very interested in lentils and not just writing about them, but also eating them. So one of the reasons and kind of one of the main things that I learned from Dave and that I talked about in Lentil Underground is supporting this crop that's so key to sustainable agriculture in Montana. So we grow all this grain in Montana. What does grain need in order to sort of get the fertility it needs out of the ground? It needs nitrogen. And in conventional agriculture, we produce that nitrogen with a lot of fossil fuel. So it's a really, really big part of the greenhouse gas footprint of agriculture, all this fossil fuel that goes into our chemical fertilizer. So lentils and chickpeas and dry peas can put nitrogen into the ground because they can pull it out of the atmosphere and work with these bacteria in the soil to convert that nitrogen into a fertilizer that's made by this plant-bacteria relationship. So one of the reasons to eat lentils is to support sustainable agriculture and family farmers who can add this to the rotation, build their soil, and make more money at the same time as part of solving the climate problem. But it's also just this great, really, really healthy food that people have been eating for 10,000 years for really good reason, and working people in particular, because it's so nutrient dense. It's obviously high in protein, it's a great plant-based protein, but it's also really high in micronutrients. So this stuff was amazing to me. After researching this book, I started talking to Allison Harmon, who's a nutritionist that works a lot with Dave, and her students at Montana State have done some like sustainability studies with Dave, but her field is nutrition, and she started asking these questions about micronutrients and finding that a half-cup serving of lentils provides 45% of recommended daily folate, which is really important, especially for women who are pregnant, for the developing embryo. 1 cup of lentils has potassium comparable to a banana. And then the really, really surprising fact to me was that antioxidants, that if you look at lentils on the ORAC scale of antioxidants, they actually come out ahead of blueberries. So, normally we think about our grain and, if we're having beans or some kind of protein, and then adding on top of that, what are we going to add with vegetables or herbs for our micronutrients? But of course, ancient grains and legumes, people were getting micronutrients in their grains and legumes as well. So some of the reasons why I think it's great to work with lentils in your kitchen, as well as we're going to see, they cook pretty fast for a plant-based protein. And you can soak them overnight. And another thing I've learned from Allison is that it is nutritionally helpful to soak your lentils overnight. You'll get a little bit more of the nutrients out of them, but you don't have to. You can still cook them in less than half an hour if you don't. So I'm going to open it up for some questions in a minute, but first I'm going to check and see how we're doing on our softness, and we're doing pretty good, actually. A lot of the water has cooked off. So I'm going to keep an eye on these and keep an eye on that teapot. And I'm going to check in on our garlic. How's it going over here with the garlic mincing? Ira is a rock star. Ira and I have actually known each other since middle school. So. Yeah. Always good to have garlic, as much as we love it, in relatively small pieces, yes. It is catching up.
It's a science
Hi, how's it going? How's the emmer?
Well, the pot should be warming up.
Do we have a measuring cup, or do we need it? Do we have a measuring? Okay. Yeah, so how about, does anybody have questions? It could be about cooking, it could be about lentils or farming or the book.
My
Or...
question was, so I should put lentils in my smoothies instead of carrots. And how is that going to taste? Depends on what else we have in there.
Yes, that's right. It's interesting, actually, the other thing we've heard a lot about is people using lentil flour as part of baking. And we've tried that a little bit too. I've made lentil cookies with this very same lentil without making it into flour because it has the skin taken off. So it can work. You can just sort of cook it and add it to baked goods. But people are actually using lentil flour in maybe some surprising things that don't necessarily taste savory.
Well, I use grocery, so I have all kinds of weird flours sometimes. So lentil flour is something that is readily available.
I don't know about that. It is out there. I don't know if it's at the good food store. I think a lot of people who use it end up grinding their own. Or especially, if it's a bakery doing it. Do you know of anybody selling bulk lentil flour?
No. You can make your own though if you have a little coffee grinder.
I do. That I use for grinding herbs. Is that-
Yeah, exactly. Yep. A few pulses of that and it'll be flour.
Any particular type of lentil that works best for that?
Oh boy, you can use about any of the. So these guys, you find in stores, the red ones, they've had their skins removed. So as they're harvested, they're kind of a brownish color. But on the inside, the seed inside, the cotton root, it's called, that's red. So you see things that's kind of bright red and pink, or we also sell some, I think, Food probably has it, that are kind of bright yellow, called harvest golds. They've had the skins taken off, they cook very quickly. Okay, so these work great in flour. You can make it in flour, or you cook it up, and I want to use it in, baked goods, brownies, or cookies, or even bread, something like that. Even after they're cooked. That's probably the one that I'd recommend. The other lentils, French green lentils, or green lentils, whatever, you still have the skins on. They have a little higher fiber content, in the skin. So in a sense, they're a little healthier. These cook very quickly because they don't have skins on them. 5 to 6 minutes at a simmer, they're done. A regular lentil, or green lentil, or a brown lentil would be more like 25 minutes. So, lentils are kind of interchangeable in recipes, but some of them just kind of work better and others are a little more convenient. These cook quicker, so it's good for like a pureed soup or something like that. Or an example here, where you want them to be cooked in 5 minutes. Something like that. Works great.
Yeah, so actually come on up and take a look because the texture is getting to the translucency point.
Well, I was just going to follow up with what he was saying. So when I see a recipe that calls for a certain kind of lentil, how?
It's not critical.
So they're kind of in 3 different stages. That one's
You know, some
kind of the slowest at this point. But this one's getting closer. You can see it's kind of it's taking on some of the color of the spice, which means it's taking on some of the flavor too. And we'll probably add a little bit of water because we want the onions to get soft. So we might need a little bit more water for that to happen. But then eventually we'll kind of cook it down and add some oil. Oh wow. She's got a booklet that's available online called Lentils, Gems in the Treasure State. And if you Google that, it's also on the Lentil Underground website. But she explains why the bioavailability goes up with soaking, and I forget. Yeah. I'm not great with planning my dinner the day before, so I can't vouch to have done it all the time. What do you think? How are we doing? Yes. I love how it makes my house smell. It's one of my favorite parts. So this one's actually the furthest along. This is starting to get... Yes.
Is there a reason why it's strictly for the spices that you boil as opposed to saute?
You know, this process is called sweating. And this is what I found when I looked up the recipe for messerwat, for this dish that I really loved that I found in an Ethiopian restaurant.
Yeah.
And this is the way that this dish is prepared, is they sweat the onions with the spice. And so that, I think there's a biochemical process that's different when you don't have a fat in there, when you've got just the water and the onion and the spice.
That makes sense.
Yeah, and so it, you know, lends a little bit different flavor.
And you're adding the cardamom to the wonderful
Yes.
I use this spices, but I never try to
Yeah, I know what you mean. But yeah, it adds just this.
1 teaspoon? It looked like you're putting more.
Yeah, because we have a little bit more onion. Yeah, so I usually start with a teaspoon, and then generally if I'm cooking it for myself, it's like kind of 2 teaspoons to 1 onion and 1 cup of lentils. If it's for somebody who's, you know,
Not as crazy as spices.
yeah. But it adds a nice, I find it lends a really nice flavor even if you don't taste a lot of the heat.
Where is it running? Pardon?
In this case, I just got it from the Good Food Store today. It will be, yeah. So it's because we add the cardamom last because it's kind of delicate, but it's amazing. It's kind of like adding salt. How you know when you add a little bit of salt and it brings out the flavor. Cardamom does that with berbera. It's a little bit of a sweet aftertaste, but it also just brings out some of the flavor of the spice blend. Yeah. And of course, it's just a moment of aromatherapy with cardamom while you're cooking. I think my whole backpack is going to smell like cardamom forever now because I brought that whole bag with it. It's actually a pepper that grows in Ethiopia. Yeah, and I think they might have it on this. I don't know where the bottom of the tin is, but yeah. But it's worth asking because sometimes when you get a lower quality berbera, they substitute cayenne. Which is actually kind of, I mean, that's an interesting spice blend too, but you notice it tastes a little bit different. But yeah, these folks, they get it from Ethiopia, and it's wild. It's a wild plant. Yeah. Yeah. Do you want to, yeah. Do you want to tell everybody about the emmer?
Sure.
Our assembled.
Yeah. So the emmer, let me just look everybody.
Maybe we'll move to the front here on the border. So we're cooking these 3 flavors of this lentil recipe, and then Dave has gotten started with the ancient grain that we are pairing with it, which is kind of fun because we're pairing in the kitchen the same things that also are complementary in rotation.
Yeah, so back about 10,000 years ago was really the genesis of agriculture, when people started domesticating both animals and plants. And primarily that all happened in the area called the Fertile Crescent, more or less kind of where Syria is today. And 2 of the first plants that were domesticated were lentils, and the other one was this grain crop called wheat, or called emmer. but it's an ancient relative of wheat, basically. It's an ancient cousin of wheat. And the modern wheat varieties over the millennia were selected and developed from this ancient grain called emmer. So, like wheat, if it's a true whole grain, it'll take about an hour, even an hour and a half to cook, something like that, because the skin on the emmer seed or the wheat seed does not allow the water to be imbibed to the inner part of the kernel. So this product called farro is really made from emmer, and the skin has been slightly scratched, which allows the water to be imbibed. So it cuts down the cooking time from an hour and a half to about 20 minutes. And so that's what we do with this emmer. We have a number of farmers across eastern Montana, central Montana grow the emmer for us, and we bring it in and then process it and scratch the seed coat a little bit, so it cooks very quickly. The cereal grains, can be distinguished from the crops like peas, lentils, and chickpeas, which are called pulses. The peas, lentils, and chickpeas, as Liz described, have the ability in combination, cooperation basically with bacteria in the soil, to capture nitrogen out of the air and make their own fertility. Whereas the cereal grains like wheat, barley, oats don't have that capability. They are basically scavengers of soil nutrients, whereas the legumes put nutrients back in the soil. So it makes a great rotational crop. The emmer has starch, has some amount of protein and so forth, just like wheat does. But it does not have the dietary fiber, it does not have the high level of lentils or protein that the lentils, peas, and chickpeas do. So they make a nice complement for farmers to grow in rotation. If you grow wheat year after year after year, you develop a monocrop system where diseases that affect wheat, weeds that are compatible with wheat, they basically just mushroom. So in the past 30, 40 years, farmers have been using herbicides to get rid of these volunteer plants in the wheat. And the same thing would happen with lentils. If you planted lentils year after year after year, there'd be disease buildup, there would be insect buildup, there would be weed buildup that would be compatible with that crop. So really, the best way to do farming is the way it's been done for 10,000 years, has growing things in rotation. You grow one crop that builds the soil, builds fertility, and then the next year you grow the crop, that robs some of that fertility. And the interesting thing about this is that from a culinary perspective or in your diet, it also makes sense to combine those, either to rotate them, meal to meal, or, a lot of recipes call for a combination of lentils and rice, or lentils and wheat, or lentils and emmer, or farro. And the reason for that is you put those both together, you get a complete protein. The lentils don't have, 100% of the protein complex that a person needs, the amino acids, and wheat or any of the cereal grains don't have that. Combine them both in the same pot, or combine them both over the course of a week in your diet. We have a complete protein, even if you don't eat meat, you can't afford to eat meat, whatever, have some dietary restriction, or you shouldn't be eating meat. So they make a nice complement for each other. The farro, has really been kept alive on the culinary side by the Italians. Because as the modern wheats were developed out of the emmer, people got away from growing the emmer, because emmer is a lower yielding. It has this fibrous husk on it that has to be taken off. So, in more modern times, of plant breeders, but before then, farmers sort of selected out of this troublesome emmer an easier crop to grow, an easier crop to harvest, an easier crop to process, which was wheat. There's some sacrifices that were made along the way. It's always the case. You can't just kind of keep selecting for one thing and get everything all the goodness that come along with that. So, you know, a lot of people now have dietary restrictions. They're either celiac or they're sensitive to gluten that's in wheat. And a lot of those people can actually tolerate the gluten that's in emmer, you know, or kamut or einkorn, these ancient grains. So what was bred into the wheat was higher yields, easier to harvest, you know, all these things. What was bred out of wheat, you know, what was sacrificed was the complete characteristics of the wheat that allowed human beings to digest it. So, long story short, that's why a lot of people are interested in the ancient grains, because even if you're, you know, somewhat sensitive to gluten, a lot of people can eat these. The other side of it is there's just, you know, more nutrient dense than the current wheats. The downside is it's lower yielding for the farmers. You know, the downside is, you know, for the processors like Timeless, well, it's got this pesky husk on it that we have to take off. So, you know, compromises were made basically. But you know, what we've chosen to do is to complement what we have our farmers grow, the lentils and these ancient grains, because they both have high nutrient density, you know, are interesting and fun things to cook with. So that's the story of farro. It's a relative of wheat. It'll cook in 20 minutes at a simmer, just like the lentils do. So it kind of makes a nice complement.
So you mentioned the Italians were keeping that alive.
Yeah.
In what way?
Yeah, the Italians just kept growing it. You know, they liked it. They said, "Wow, this tastes great." And as you'll notice, and we'll save a little of this out, but you can taste. It kind of has a nice nutty, sweet flavor to it. You know, as opposed to wheat, which kind of tends to be a little more tart, a little higher in tannin. And the Italians, they just, you know, the Italians love food. The Italians know a lot about food, and they just kept growing it and kept using it in their recipes. You know, today you can go to, you know, in Italy you can get farro that's made into pasta, into breads, you know, into various things. It was virtually unheard of in the United States. I mean, you could not find farro in the United States, except, you know, maybe in some Italian specialty stores, but it just was not common at all 20 years ago. And really about 10 years ago, it really kind of started to catch the attention of some of the chefs in the high-end restaurants, white tablecloth restaurants. You know, people who really knew about flavor, really knew about, you know, culinary characteristics that were important to them. And but before that, it was really only the Italians that kind of kept growing it, kept using it in their diet over the millennia. It's a 10,000-year-old crop. You know, that, I mean, kind of, without the Italians, it may have actually kind of disappeared. You know. So anyway, one of the reasons that the chefs like the emmers, and even after it's cooked, that's what they call tube to it. Have a little sponginess, a little interesting texture. So, you know, it's great in soups, but also in salads as well. Or you can grind it into flour if you've got a home grinder and use it as a portion of your bread or pancakes. Make something.
All right, we're here. We're at our texture that we like. The onions are translucent, so we're going to add a little bit of olive oil. So we've been, I was describing this to one of you earlier, we've been sweating the onions. So it's just been water, onion, spice. So this idea I got from this Ethiopian recipe to start with the spice of the onion and the water before adding the fat. So we add a little bit of olive oil, and we'll add a little bit to all three here. And so now the onions will start to brown a little bit. And this is also the stage when we add the garlic. Very nicely minced. And if you're in a hurry, you can totally do this recipe without garlic. But speaking of all those great nutritional benefits of lentils and ancient grains, garlic is pretty great for you too. And then this part of the process is just about 5 minutes before we add the lentils in. So if anybody wants to come on up and peek. Yes. Very good. Oh, yeah. I love garlic. Do you know the New Olcatus family? They have a garlic themed potluck every year. They've been doing it for like 30 plus years. Even the desserts have to have garlic in them. Yes. Oh, yeah. People always show up with garlic brownies. All right. So we're going to do a cup of these petite crimson lentils in each of these pots. And I think, Dave, you mentioned that they're decorticated. The skins are taken off. So this is more of like a dal lentil. They'll cook a little faster and they'll have a little bit creamier texture. And then we'll need to add a lot of water pretty quickly. So. Start running around with the teapot. And so this is really the part of the process once the lentils are in there where you kind of add water as you go. This one had a little bit more water to start with, so it's got kind of a running start.
So the red lentils, since they've had the skins taken off, when they hit the water, they release the starches right away, so they would tend to stick together. So it's great, you pour them in a crock pot, just stir them a little bit to separate the lentils. Otherwise, they'll kind of lump together a little bit.
Yeah. Any other questions? So now we have another period of probably 15, 20 minutes while things cook, and then at the end of this period, we actually get to eat it. Yeah.
So there's really no measurement of water, just kind of look and.
Yes. Keep your onions covered in water. So at one point, actually, they did start to brown a little bit over there, and there was a little bit of smoke coming out, but it'll just taste like kind of smoky cumin and chili powder.
And then you added more water on
Yes, yeah, and that was, just as Dave said, they'll kind of stick together. And the lentils will definitely need more water than the onions did. So yeah, it's just kind of a matter of keeping an eye on them. If you start to see them sticking to the bottom of the pan, then they need more water.
So I know you did the book, and behind the scenes, everybody worked together as far as growing the lentils, and that you're working on the book. But did it really all go hand in hand once you had the crop and had to figure out what you're going to do with it? I mean, Dave, I can't see that you were always probably out there in the kitchen demonstrating how to cook your lentils, but it came as an after.
Okay, I actually missed the first part.
Oh,
Sorry.
was that? Okay, so I know why you started and you were growing the lentils.
Right.
And because of lentil underground, we all knew that. And now it seems to be hand in hand that also educating people how to prepare it, cook it,
Yep.
do it. And you had to start learning it also.
Yep. That's right. That's right.
So how did you start eating lentils?
Well, okay, why did I start eating lentils? So, as you mentioned, I started growing it as a soil building crop. Strictly. Grow it, and then, cultivate it back in the ground soil building crop. And then as I did, some research, started to understand it more and started to understand this terrific culinary history that it had. When you go on the internet and type, lentil soup or lentil salad, it's hundreds, probably, I'm sure there's thousands of recipes, okay? Virtually every culture, on the planet, with the exception of North America, over the centuries, has had lentils as a pretty significant part of their diet. And so as I started understanding that, I thought, well, that's pretty interesting. I should be eating this stuff, right? Just kind of the more I learned, the more I learned you know, what a nutritional powerhouse that it is. I'm gonna pass this around right now. Here's a little. There's some kind of some info sheets, some of it on nutrition, some of it on uses. So some of the questions that you've asked, I'll talk about, but it's also in there. So the irony is, when I moved back to the farm in 1976, family farm near Conrad, I moved back to raise organic beef. Okay, I grew up, you know, my dad had a little feedlot, you know, we raised cows and so forth. So my great idea coming back from college, you know, U of M, right? You know, I had crazy ideas put in my head. And so I was going to convert the farm to certified organic and raise organic beef as basically the revenue stream. Okay. So, you know, kind of did that, kind of figured out how to farm. You know, my dad, as virtually all farmers were in those days, were, you know, kind of conventional, you know, chemical farmers. And so I, you know, came back with all these crazy ideas and didn't want to do that. So I had to figure out how to do it a different way. And organic beef was going to be one of the ways to do that. But the first load of, you know, pickup load, the first 2 beef I took over to the slaughterhouse and was talking to the USDA inspector about, I want to sell this as organic beef. And he said, you can't do that. That is illegal. You cannot put organic on the label. Because USDA, you know, to their credit, monitors and restricts what you can actually put on a meat label. Okay, well, organic was not an option in those days in the 80s. It was not until the National Organic Program was instituted on a federal level in 2002 that organic was just right on the label, or was authorized on the label. Okay. So that was one business idea. But as I started growing, you know, lentils, my friends and I started growing lentils, starting understanding more how healthy they were for the soil and how healthy they were for the body. I thought, well, gee, you know, we should be eating these. Everybody should be eating more of these. And then about maybe 10 or 15 years ago, my daughter grew up in Minneapolis, became a registered nurse. I had my blood workup at the local clinic, the annual blood workup. Had 4 pages of numbers. I sent it to Sarah and said, Sarah, what do all these numbers mean? She calls me up immediately. Dad, you have to quit eating red meat. Your cholesterol is sky high. It's going to kill you. Believe me. You need to quit eating red meat. You know, and I mean, it's kind of a light bulb. So, well, wait a minute. I need to pay a lot more attention, you know, with what I'm eating and the effect on my health. And then the other light bulb went off and said, wait a minute, I'm growing lentils. You know, I should be eating a lot more of lentils. So as it turns out, you know, in following my daughter's advice, which, you know, all of us follow our daughter's advice, right? Especially when they're very pointed advice. Anyway, I just decided to become a vegetarian out of some was out of health, some was just sort of out of principle. Like, why do I even eat red meat? I don't have to eat red meat. I've got lentils, I've got emmer, I've got all these things. It's a complete protein. So I just gave it up. You know, not that everybody should do that. You know, it needs to do that. It's just like I did it. That's what I did. So whatever. I lost 15 pounds. My cholesterol went down. I'm a bicyclist. I had more energy for riding bicycles or all these things. Like, okay, I get it. Okay. So giving up red meat, you know, and actually just give up all meat, but that sort of makes lunch and dinner a little more challenging, you know? Because I'm a Montana kid. We all grew up eating meat and potatoes, right? For breakfast, my mom made bacon. You know, for lunch, we had a hamburger. You know, for dinner, it would be a pork roast, right? They're like, I mean, that's what I grew up with, and that's what that's the meals I made when I went to college for myself and everything, as a young adult. So I sort of had to retool my brain about, what food was all about for me. So, it was a matter of necessity. Once I said I'm going to give up meat, okay, I got to learn a lot more about cooking now, and other helpful grains. And as it turns out, they are an extremely versatile ingredient. Whether it's appetizers or chip dips or soups or salads, main courses, even in desserts, little cookie recipes, little cake recipes, everything else out there. It actually wasn't that tough in the end. It was kind of a lot of fun to do it. So, and there's thousands, tens of thousands of recipes on the internet. Interesting, it's fun, and amaze your friends, and bring them over to dinner. Yeah. And, it is extremely simple too. I'm right now kind of leading a pretty busy life running this company. And, a lot of times I get home late at night and I'll just boil up some of these, crimson lentils because they'll cook in 15 minutes. Put a little butter on them, put a little salt on them. It's just a great, it's a great dish, either a side dish or even as a main dish. A little soy sauce or olive oil and balsamic vinegar, it's easy to make. It's easy to make a simple and nutritious meal. This is making this very complicated. You got to find Berber, all this stuff. It's great, and it'll be great.
One thing, Dave, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
What is the shelf life of, package of?
The shelf life package of lentils, it's indefinite. We put a tag on there that says best if used by, it's 4 years from when it was packaged. But as long as it's kept at, at kind of room temperature, relatively dry, literally years. Some of the lentils, we sell these large green lentils, and even French green lentils. Over time, the skins will oxidize. So like a lentil that's kind of a musty green color. But it's, when it's just harvested in 3 or 4 years, or maybe 2 or 3 years, it'll kind of turn, browner, kind of brown to red. And it doesn't hurt it nutritionally at all. It's just the oxidized skin. So aesthetically, it may not be as good, but it'll last forever.
The emmer is
Better
looking.
not last forever. You better eat it. I'm just
The
saying.
emmer looks kind of like it might be done.
What's that? That's done?
Maybe.
Yeah, it should be. Yeah, it should be done.
Should I turn it off?
Yeah.
Okay.
We might have to drain it.
Yeah. I'll try a little bit.
No, I think it's fine.
Okay. Anybody who knows my mom knows that I grew up in a house with a lot of I think that's done. We have a lot of pot holders with burn marks, and we used to have telephones with burn marks. So luckily they now have an electric range rather than a gas range, so the potential for disaster is at least limited somewhat. So we're getting really close. Actually, I think you should come up and check this out. See the transformation in the texture of the crimson lentils. We've been cooking them maybe for 15 minutes, 10, 15 minutes now, and they've softened up. They're definitely, you could eat this now if you were in a hurry or really hungry, but the next 5 minutes, it's going to become more doll-like. Something that we learned is that adding salt slows down the cooking process of a legume. So you want to add it at the end so you don't slow yourself down. If anybody can find salt that's a little bit smaller, let me know.
Oh boy, it was a long, slow process of
That shelf is something else. Oh, salt. Thank you. Perfect. Then nobody will crunch down on. They work great if it's earlier in the cooking process, but those big crystals would be kind of a shock. These nice new burners are really helpful. Yeah. I've done this a couple times on like outdoor hot plates and community gardens, and it's like, please. Yeah, yeah. You know, I don't know what's great, but I had actually my thesis advisor at Berkeley wrote a book called Understories, because, and that was a kind of a play on words too, because he was studying the politics of community forestry. So it was the understories of the community politics as well as the understory of the forest. So that might have sparked something. Good. Yes, I'm going to speak at the Denison Theater at University of Montana tomorrow at 8. Yes. No, this is the only cooking. The UM chefs are making a lentil lunch on Friday at noon. So, Payne Family Native American Center. That's on the Omo. Yeah. Yeah. They're going to have a hard time getting the kids out there, you know, because they're busy. So they'd be delighted if you showed up. So everything is done. So the last step here, I'm turning the burners off, and I'm adding just a little bit of olive oil at the end, and just a little bit of salt, which will bring the flavors out. And then for the Berber one, I'm going to add the cardamom, and then we're going to eat it. So yeah, if anybody wants to figure out what we're going to eat it in, that's our next challenge. So we're finding some bowls and some spoons.
Yeah, they know what they're doing. I watched a moose a few weeks ago stripping the leaves off a tree, and he would, there'd be a little stem with leaflets on it, and he would put it in his mouth, just roll his mouth down, and he had a big wad of leaves, chew them up. Just had it down. I was stripping those leaves off the stem.
All right. So here are the bowls. If you don't yet have a spoon or a utensil, we've got some here. Emmer for kind of the base, and then you can try a little bit of each flavor if you want to. The berbera is back here, then the curry, and then the cumin and chili powder. And you can just use the same spoon that we stirred with to serve. Oh, and you're amazing. Thank you. Oh, it smells great. So this is the cilantro, and then she's getting ready some parsley too. So depending on your flavor, maybe one makes more sense than the other. Actually, I'm going to grab a spoon.
Yes, that's a 5. That's a 5. The opening of the exhibit, so that's a 5.
Yes.
Those two?
I'm trying to find a corner for each one, but you could also do them in series.
And then she's
I see what you mean, yeah.
So I did sort of like this flavor trio.
Yeah, that's good. Let's go and talk to Maddox, and I know your friend. because she was
Yes.
asking about,
They raise
do Maddox raise?
Oh, no, their whole system is based on legumes being grazed down by cattle.
Okay.
So they do similar kind of soil building.
but then the cows raise. That's what.
Yeah, yeah,
I just knew that he came to your presentation at Barber's store,
yes,
and he said he was a friend of yours, so.
yeah. Yeah, and we all had a little appetizer
That's right.
together before that.
That would be a true man.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, nice that you know. So you taught him? Cool.
Yeah, that's where our facility is, that's where our process all
Oh, okay, that's.
Oh, yeah. It sure
Yes, it
seems
is.
it. Just great people. Yeah.
Trouble finding a publisher.
At first, yes. I had people interested if I was willing to change it a little bit. But the thought that the idea that a book with Lennell in the title was going to appeal to a general audience didn't make sense immediately to everybody in the publishing industry in New York. But when we found the people who got it, they were great partners in the project. And it turned out we ended up working with an editor who was from the same town in Montana that Dave was from.
So that's what